So we thank you for being here at the Plymouth Area Tea Party Patriots meeting this evening, and we are honored to have with us Representative Frank Edelblut from Wilton, New Hampshire.
Thank you so much for having me. I certainly appreciate you guys coming out on a snowy April day, right? So thanks for coming. I am running for governor for three principal reasons. But I'm going to change this up a little bit because I know some people here have heard some of these stories before. They've heard some of the speech, so I'll shortcut some of the early pieces, and I want to add some content that maybe some of you haven't heard before. But the first one really is that New Hampshire needs to move forward. We need to embrace the 21st century. We need to make it work for us and not view it as a threat. There are a couple of constituencies in this state that we have left behind. There are young people who we all know are leaving the state in record numbers, and I surmise that they are leaving the state because there are not good jobs for them here. 3 of my kids have graduated from college. One is in Chicago, one is outside of Washington, D.C. in Northern Virginia, and one has the consolation prize of New Hampshire Economic Development, Boston. Close, but no cigar. Right? You almost got here, but you didn't quite get here. And the reason why we have left these young people behind is because we've got officials in the corner office who function more like custodians and managers than they do leaders. And as custodians and managers, what they do is they maintain the status quo. I mean, think about the companies that you've ever been in, right? What do companies do? Managers, they keep the system running the same over time, right? Nothing changes, they just keep it rolling. And that's what we've gotten from our leadership in Concord. They're just trying to maintain the status quo, and when it frays around the edges a little bit, what do? They throw a little duct tape on there and try and keep it going. The problem is that there's a false premise there. Their assumption is, if I stay steady, if I hold the status quo, everything will be okay. But in fact, by holding steady, we're falling behind because the states around us are moving on. The world around us is moving on, and we're stuck in this status quo. So the first reason that I'm running is that we need to embrace the 21st century. Now, the way we're going to do that is we need to change the type of leadership that we have in the state. And I believe that we need an entrepreneur as a leader at this point in time, at this moment in history. Now, my background is one that I started my career at a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers. So I'm an accountant, I'm a finance guy, I get numbers, and I know how numbers function. After I finished my career there, I started a company called Control Solutions, and it's a great American story. Right? Start the business at the kitchen table. When my wife gets tired of not being able to serve dinner, what happens is she kicks me off of the kitchen table and I get an office, which is I take one of my kids out of their bedroom to move in with their sibling, and I move into the bedroom as an office. That business was successful. God was good. I sold it in 2009. At the time, we had over 800 employees and we were operating in over 20 countries. At that time, I then left and I joined a group called Common Angels down in Boston doing early stage investing. I'm an angel investor. So think Shark Tank, but not nearly as fun, right? I mean, that's what I'm doing. So I'm looking at, guys, people who have businesses, individuals, could be anywhere from a twinkle in their eye till they're a little bit further along on that revenue curve, but trying to invest in the businesses and help grow jobs, for these entrepreneurs who are starting out. In 2013, I left Common Angels and I ran for the State House. So now I serve in the legislature, and I serve on 3 committees: Child and Family Law, Pension Reform, and the Finance Committee. Now, I have to tell you something, and by the way, I still do my Shark Tank work as well, but now I do it just as an independent guy, and I do it with some friends of mine and others who I know who are interested in the same kinds of things. I never imagined that I would be running for the State House. I never imagined I'd be a state representative. So I certainly never imagined I'd be running to be the governor of the state. And what happened really for me was when I was running my business, I had my head down. My life consisted of airplanes and soccer games, right? Because I was just trying to run my business, make payroll, take care of all the things that it needed. After I sold the business in 2009, I was able to lift my head up and look around. And this is when I saw that things weren't as good as they could be, right? And so, which is part of the problem that we have with the young people being left behind. But there's another constituent that I also observed being left behind, and that is what I'll call kind of older folks who might be, 50, 55, 60 years old. These are people who are probably college educated. They've had good jobs in the past, and they're looking at another 10 to 20 years of work potentially. And yet in this last recession, they had their legs cut out from underneath them. They've not landed well. They are trying to scrape together and find out, how can I pay off the mortgage, keep up with the real estate taxes. If I got kids in college, how am I going to get the kids through college? These are things that they're struggling with, and they're trying to figure out what to do with. And so this is the second constituent that we've really left behind. So the reasons I'm running is, number one, we need to go forward. We need to move into the 21st century. The second is that we need a certain type of leadership. We need an entrepreneurial leadership that really is going to be able to put this state on a new trajectory, a new direction for the state. Because if we send someone up there, and I don't care if they're a Democrat, an Independent, or a Republican, and all they do is they just rearrange the deck chairs, right? And they tell us oh, doesn't it look great? Look what a great job I've done. That's not going to put us on a new trajectory. It's not going to put us on a new direction for the state. And so we need somebody who, as an entrepreneur, kind of a blessing and a curse, we embrace the future. We like change. We like to make the change work for us. And so that's really what I'm going to focus on. But then there's the third aspect, and this is actually new content for some of you who've heard me give speeches before. I talked to you about my career. I did Price Waterhouse, and then I started a company, but I skipped over a piece in there. I actually spent a year as the CFO for a public company, so the Chief Financial Officer for a public company. Now, here I was at Price Waterhouse. Things were going well. I had been there for 8 years. I was 28 years old, and they're telling me, Frank, you're doing a great job. In fact, you're doing such a good job. What we're going to do is we're going to transfer you to New York, and in New York, you'll make all the right connections, and you can become a partner in this firm. And then really at that moment, and then you'll get to do this for the rest of your life. And I kind of had this thing flashed before my eyes. I'm 28 years old, and I'm thinking, wait, I'm going to do this for the next 30 years of my life? I'm like, is there anything behind door number 2? Because now I understand what's behind door number 1, And it was at that moment that I took and I looked around. I said, I want to do something different with my life. I wanted some different challenges. Not that Price Waterhouse wasn't a great company, but I wanted some different challenges. And so I found one of the customers of Price Waterhouse. It wasn't one of my clients, and they offered me a position to be the Chief Financial Officer for this small public company. And I thought, this is going to be great. And so I move over there. Here I am at 28 years old. I'm making a ton of money. I've got lots of stock options. Life is good. I also had responsibility for the manufacturing operations. We were operating a plant in North Carolina. The business manufactured home therapy equipment. I probably should have gotten the kind of the warning that something wasn't exactly right when I was able to fly to North Carolina in that Gulfstream jet. Now, many of our investors in this company, it was a public company, but a lot of the large shareholders were from South America, from Venezuelans, specifically. And it was probably 3, 4, 5 months into this process that all of a sudden I realized that there were some criminal activities taking place in this business. And I'm thinking, what did I do? What did I get myself into? At the time, I've got 2 kids. I got one on the way. And I'm thinking, what did I do? I had this great career at Price Waterhouse, and now I'm facing these, I'm faced with a moral dilemma, really. I'm paid well, and things are going well in terms of that side of it, but you have to realize that you got to do the right thing. You're faced with this situation. So I did. I went to the board. I learned some new Spanish words during this process, caballeros being one of them. Which came along with, threats, of harm to myself and to my family. But again, I went to the board, I exposed the problems that were going on, and obviously I lost my job and I didn't get to take any of those stock options with me. And, the mother of, of all, necessity is the mother of all invention, though. I mean, I'm not, I don't begrudge it because that resulted in the launching of Control Solutions, the business that I started afterwards. But I share that story with you because, we need a leader, who has the right moral compass to be able to direct them in that governor's office. There's going to be days when you guys aren't going to be looking over my shoulder, but I still got to do the right thing. I have to do the right thing for the state. And you need a leader who has the moral compass that says, this is the right principle. This is where we need to go, and is committed to getting there, and is not going to be swayed by all kinds of, political expediency. And I think that's what we're seeing in this race right now. The classic politician who says, I was for something before I was against it. I mean, we can take an issue like Medicaid expansion right now. And we've got a number of candidates in this race who were against it before they were for it. And I just see this and I'm like, well, you're either for it or you're not. Like, just make up your mind. Nobody's going to criticize you for having an opinion, but at least settle on something. Have a moral compass that tells you where to go and what you're going to do. We have another problem with that, which is you've got candidates in this race who are uncertain about, and trying to get along with everybody. And so they make decisions that compromise the principles that they believe in. And I'm going to point to a couple of them. I've been told that this is not out of bounds to do this because I'm not really interested in the negativity. But we have appointed this year a gentleman to be the Commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services for the state. Now, this controls 40% of the state budget. And who did we pick to put in charge of that other than a guy who, architected welfare expansion Obamacare in New Hampshire, who is a card-carrying Democrat who's donated thousands of dollars to the Democrats. Now, when we elected a Republican executive council, we assumed that they would take our Republican values with them and use that to help guide their decisions. But we didn't do that. Instead, what we did is we wanted to get along. We want everybody to like us. So what happened? We didn't, but the executive, at least one executive counselor made the easy decision to get along with people. And now we've got a commissioner of the Department of Health and Human Services who doesn't represent our values. I'm going to give you another example. And that is the Department of Education. The Board of Education for the state just recently had 3 members come up to be reinstated, right? To be reappointed. Now, we all knew that these were individuals who supported Common Core, who supported smarter balance testing, who don't like charter schools, who resist any effort at school choice, and in fact, instrumental in attacking one of our local towns who had school choice. Again, I brought 3 qualified candidates who respect Republican values to the Executive Council. I brought a list of all the reasons why we don't want to reappoint these 3 individuals. But again, you had executive counselors, at least one, who sided with the Democrats and put these individuals back in power again. And you know what? That's bad enough. But let me tell you what happened last week. Last week, down in Windham, there was an application for a charter school, a STEM charter school. Everybody in the state agrees we need more STEM education for the kids. We need this in our state. Guess what happened? Those school board members, those Department of Education board members who were appointed in this compromise decision voted against the charter school. So Windham does not have a charter school today because of that. And so the point is, we need leadership that knows what they're after. We know that has that moral compass, that knows how to make right decisions and go. It doesn't mean we're going to get everything done at one time. But as I say in my businesses, if I made 51% of the decisions correct every day, that's a good day because I'm continuing moving along in the direction of freedom, in the direction of liberty, and the direction of economic prosperity for the state. And that's what we need, is somebody who's going to continually move along in those directions. And so that's why I would like you to support me for governor, because I know what it's like to grab hold of the 21st century. I've been doing it my entire career. I know what it's like to not be threatened by the environment that we're in, but to find a way to take that environment and make it work for us as an entrepreneur would. And I have a moral compass that's going to lead us down the path to Republican values. Thank you. Are we going to do questions? Sure. Okay. Okay, and I'll repeat the questions. Wonderful. Yes.
I'll start.
Okay.
Northern Pass.
Yeah, so Northern Pass is an easy one. We need energy in the state, certainly. But Northern Pass would be built today if we buried it, if we follow existing right-of-ways. And the third piece that I think we need to do is we need to negotiate something on behalf of the New Hampshire ratepayers. And I don't know if that means a penny and a half, or 2 pennies for the next 50 years or what. But, you know, if it's cutting through our communities, we need something that helps New Hampshire ratepayers.
Okay, agreed. We ought to do bury down 93, because right now it's being buried, but it's being buried in front of my
existing right-of-ways. We're not going to.
Main Street, Plymouth, New Hampshire, is where it's going. Right down. They're going to dig up Main Street, Plymouth, New Hampshire.
Rather than 93.
Rather than.
Then we should just put it down 93. Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yep.
That's
Electric corridors. Okay.
next question.
Next question.
Railroad.
So I do not support railroad. I think that this is an example, honestly, of you know, the wrong kind of leadership that doesn't embrace the 21st century. Railroads were invented in 1804. Now, why would we turn to technology that was invented in 1804 to solve a 21st century problem? I believe that by the time they got that railroad project approved and built, we will have hands-free cars in, you know, driving on the roads already. So you're not going to need the railroad, besides the fact that that railroad is going to probably just cause New Hampshire to become a suburb of Boston. It will no longer have a unique, you know, discrete economy.
More cars.
Or be like hands-free cars. That's so there'll be hands-free cars on that, you know, coming down the middle of 93 as well. And that, I mean, so the infrastructure is already there. You won't even need the monorail because they're coming. In 10 years, this technology will be here, right? So you'll see it. I know it's scary, isn't it? Everybody's like, no, not the hands-free car. Yeah, I've actually ridden on some of the excursion railroads, so I'm going to leave that. We're talking, this railroad here, we're talking about commuter rail. As opposed to, if there's an opportunity for a specialty railroad, and I think that you ought to be able to attract investment dollars, and somebody ought to invest in it and make it work. I mean, I've been up the Cog Railroad myself, so you know, so that's almost a discrete business premise or business opportunity that someone's going to invest in and use. So, which is a little different than commuter rail.
Right, right. I'm not talking about the commuter rail.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of questions in there. You know, let's start at the federal level. You know, there is no doubt that the federal government is incurring, you know, into our state. And it's beyond that, though, because we're sending them, you know, $10 billion. They're sending us back $8 and telling us how to spend it. So step number one is we need a governor who's willing to push back. There is the 10th Amendment there. When you say, like, this is our money, we've got it, we can figure out how to do these things for ourselves. We don't need that. Unfortunately, the types of leaders that we've had in Concord so far have essentially been taking orders from Washington. You know, Washington is dictating state policy through all of the strings that they attach to the money that they send to us for programs. At the state level, I think you picked on at least one of them, and I think you alluded to the other one, but you have, whether it's DHHS in terms of all the licensing associated with food service, or it's as well DES. Is has this incursion into, you know, the farming, but it's also, you know, you look around the state, there are businesses who are being terrorized, you know, because folks are coming, DES is coming in and sometimes, you know, out of bounds, making accusations which maybe are unfounded on these companies and threatening them with hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines if they don't just pay up the fine. And it seems that there's sort of a circular system, because you then try to get, you know, there's environmental consultants and environmental attorneys, and you don't know, some days they work for you and some days they work on the side of the DES. And it's like everybody's making money except the poor business owner who's being subjected to this. So we really need to rein in that. I think part of the problem is they've done such a good job in the state getting rid of all the high pollutant problems and stuff like that. Then we got extra people, yeah, exactly, like, oh no, now what are we going to do? You know, so they're trying hard to find opportunities to be able to, you know, stay engaged and stay busy. So we really need to scale the size of the agency to the problem. And I think maybe we haven't got that right now. Well, so it is true that I will be working with them, but as well, they are there to represent the policies of the governor. So if you've got a governor who is, you know, pro-Common Core, pro-smarter balance testing, you know, anti-charter school and anti-school choice, then they are reflecting that policy of the governor. So these folks actually have, the responsibility to reflect the policies of the governor. So I will work with them to say, this is where I am, this is the kind of thing that I want, and I'll have to be as persuasive as I can to bring them along. Because as you know, the governor, my job as the governor, like I don't have per se a legislative agenda. My job is to make the state of New Hampshire hum, like work really efficiently and execute well. And I have to bring the legislature along with me in order to create that legislative agenda that helps that take place. So they will be setting a legislative agenda that the school board and the governors, the governor, the governor's council, as well as the Board of Education will have to work with to execute.
To do things.
Right. So I probably would not support the idea of creating a new department because the government doesn't need any encouragement getting bigger. But I think that it is probably as a legitimate responsibility of an existing department, and I'm not sure exactly where that would go, if it would be part of DHHS or DOT or something like that, or in the energy. So I don't know who would responsible for that, but I think it is important that we communicate to people how to be prepared in the event of kind of an EMP type of an emergency.
National Guard wouldn't be a bad idea.
Could be there, right? The New Hampshire Guard.
We used to have civil defense.
Is that right? Okay. I'll take your word for that. I mean, I do know we have the New Hampshire Guard facility at this point in time, and so you've got, we've got a general and a whole command structure there.
During the Cold War, there was the civil defense, and actually the police, and then I was a member of the civil defense because I was a part-time police officer.
Okay.
And we actually fell under the civil defense.
Right. And so you had preparedness for that type of an event, and so this would be the kind of thing.
Most every town had a stockpile of emergency rations, and it was in the hallway. There's a tunnel between Mary Lyon and...
Is that right?
Mary Lyon and
Rounds
Hall.
And this is where it was stored at the time? Really?
There was a way to get underground from one building to another.
Okay. Very good.
The Democrats put an end to that back in the early 70s.
The tunnel or the preparedness?
No, all of the preparedness. Civil defense doesn't exist in this country anymore. They got rid of it all.
Okay.
Because it was not polite to think about surviving when hundreds of millions of people were dead from a nuclear attack.
Okay. Can't comment on that. I can't comment on that. Well, thank you so much. Oh, another question?
Oh, yeah. How about Planned Parenthood and supporting the budget?
Yeah, exactly. So I do not. I am a pro-life candidate. I come at this from a I could talk to you about this from a religious, a theological, a philosophical, but we're here for politics tonight, right? So I would talk about it from a political perspective. And from a political perspective, we have to answer the question. The Constitution affords citizens certain rights. And so at what point do those constitutional rights inure to a child in the womb? Everybody agrees, well, I shouldn't say that. But there are some who say you have to wait until that baby's born before that baby has protectable constitutional rights. Most reasonable people back it up far before that, right? I don't think it makes sense, as a leader who's responsible for extending constitutional rights to all citizens, I'm just going to start when they're conceived, because I'm not sure that I'm smart enough to figure out exactly when that is if I needed to. So we'll just start to protect constitutional rights from conception. And that's really what we should be focused on. So toward that end, I don't think that we need to be, abortion is such a divisive issue, in culture and society. We do not need to be putting taxpayers into that process, taxpayer dollars into that process. And so I would, I don't think that we should be funding, any taxpayer money should be going to Planned Parenthood or to any, it's not just Planned Parenthood, it's any abortion providers. And I'm going to use this as another example. So just this last year, we had 5 contracts that came up in the Executive Council that needed to be approved. One of them, for one abortion provider, Planned Parenthood, was rejected by one of the other candidates running. 2 of those other companies, or 2 of those other organizations were abortion providers, but they were approved. So, you just have to be consistent in your message. If you don't want taxpayer funding going towards these things, then they shouldn't go to any of them, not just the ones that you decide are politically incorrect at the moment. So, go for it.
All right. Well, on that subject, though, is big problem. I mean, Planned Parenthood does do some good things. If we
Correct. They can continue to do good things, but they don't need taxpayer money for abortions. Why don't we just separate those activities?
Taxpayer money to do the lobbying.
Correct.
And which comes back to my next point, which is right to work and unions, which are collecting money from everybody and paying for politicians.
Agency fees, exactly. So we do not, right, I support right to work. I have voted for it in the House a couple, every time it's come in, I would love to get a right to work bill on my desk and I will sign it the day it shows up. So, I mean, because, if you think about it, so, I mean, on all these issues, and this will be good, we can just do rapid fire on a whole bunch of issues, because I voted on all kinds of issues. Like, my record is not a secret. Like, I don't have to make it up, whether it's right to work or 2A or whatever thing is important to you. I'm happy to do that.
I see the government working against me all the time. When I graduated from college, I was looking for work, and they wouldn't hire me because I wasn't a Democrat. And they actually told me that.
Well, so yeah, so I think that would be considered, against the law today. I don't know how they got away with that.
Not that long ago. This was only 20 years ago.
Right.
And now I had a nice business going in New York. I was making between 4,000 and 5,000 pounds of lead bullets, and selling them, and selling loaded ammunition. And now the EPA turned around and has outlawed lead. And I have no lead to work with.
Right.
So I'm kind of out of business.
This is really, I think that the assault on the raw materials used for munitions is really an assault on the Second Amendment, is what's going on. And so, some people have an agenda where they oppose the Second Amendment, and they can't get at it by attacking the Second Amendment, so they're just looking at other ways that they can try and shortcut that purpose. I will let you know that you're not the only person who's suffering from a shortage of lead for reloading.
I have several hundred pounds of it.
Well, you can borrow some of his. Castle Doctrine, yeah. So, I mean, probably this isn't the best forum. I would say go talk to your police chief, and he's going to tell you exactly what you can and can't do, where you can carry, where you may not carry. As you know, we have tried several times in order to pass constitutional carry in this state. I often, comment that we're a very generous group, the Republicans in the House, because we believe in second chances for people. So we have given the governor a second chance at approving and passing constitutional carry, and she won't have to veto that bill. I'm not sure whether or not that will get passed or not. I suspect that she'll probably veto it. But again, we try to give her every opportunity that she can to support the Second Amendment and the Constitution that she has sworn to uphold. So.
Well, you can go.
Well, I'm going to comment more broadly, and then I'll try and go a little bit more specifically. But so the business that I started, I was an entrepreneur for, we basically provided regulatory compliance services to Fortune 2000 companies. So I know something about the regulatory environment and how, and the effect that regulations are, the negative effect that regulations are having on businesses in terms of the overreach, and how to cope with them as a business. The second point I want to make is, and I think that this is an important consideration, and I've not honestly gotten a legitimate answer to this question, but if the legislature passes a measure, then that makes it a law. If a regulatory body passes the exact same measure, is that a law or is that a regulation? And if it's a regulation, then what is the difference between a law and a regulation other than the body that passes it? And what in fact is the restraint on the regulatory bodies from just passing anything that they want, right? Other than we, in this state, we have jail car, I understand, but just, yeah, but you see what I'm saying? Okay.
I can try and
So, but substantively, you're saying the same thing I am. In other words, so you're differentiating a rule differs from a law because of the process through which it goes. But what I'm trying to say is, what's that? And the process is, and that's part of the process to get it in place, the process to change it, the process to maintain it. But I submit to you, if it says the exact same thing, if the legislative body passes and says everybody must stand on, 1 foot on Tuesday afternoons, and then that's a law, right? And we all have to obey it. And if a regulatory agency says everybody must stand on 1 foot on Tuesday afternoons, that's a regulation. But it's substantively the same thing. So what is substantively the difference? One imagines that the law is supposed to be, stronger and more and supersedes, and this is supposed to be more of an implementation. But I think what we've seen is the elevation of regulation to the same substantive effect of law. And so,
and that's why it's the same thing that's happened in the U.S. government.
right.
That the legislative body has relinquished their authority
To make law.
to these their authority to make law to these regulations. So the bills now, because it's easier to get this bill through, no longer specify. When you do a bill, you're down there.
Absolutely. Yep.
You no longer specifies exactly how it will be done. They simply say,
Do it.
you will make rules to implement what we think it is, and consequently, you end up with these rules that aren't necessarily
Reflective of the law.
what the legislature.
And so I would, I surmise, or I suggest that the legislature has been neglect in their responsibility by over delegating their responsibility.
Get 1,000 or 2,000, 1,400 bills every year.
Maybe we'd get less if we have to actually stay there and finish them all correctly.
And, if we go back to biannual session, that might solve
Correct.
some of the problems.
It may be part of the, yeah,
The legislature feels they got to put in 4 or 5 bills so it looks like they're doing something.
right. To keep things going. Yes, exactly. So, how are we doing on time? We're okay? Because I just want to share one other aspect. Then let me talk a little bit about economic development, because this is what I talk about in terms of the plan, and it plays to your question a little bit about laws and regulations. But I think that we have a lot of the really good resources in place already in the state in order to get this economy moving again. And I want to point to 3 areas. It's kind of like a 3-legged stool. The first is advanced manufacturing companies. We've got some companies in the state that are doing some really good precision manufacturing, high profit types of products that are not that easy to make, that we can be specialized in. So New Hampshire can carve out its niche, so to speak, in terms of being able to do that. The second leg of this stool that we have is the community college system, which has some really good advanced manufacturing programs. So these kids who are going through these advanced manufacturing programs are coming out with sometimes 2 job offers, maybe 3 job offers at $45,000 to $55,000 starting. And they're not buried in debt, quite frankly, because they were in the community college system, not just a 4-year university. And then the third leg of this school is we need to work with the high schools. And in particular, in education right now, you've got a fixed component and a variable component. Today, we fix the amount of time. Thou shalt spend 4 years at 180 days per year in high school. And the variable component is some people learned a lot, some people didn't learn much at all. Maybe we need to flip this thing around. The point is, the fixed component is you have to acquire a certain amount of knowledge, and the variable component is if one guy can do it in 2 years, fine, finish it in 2 years. If another guy can do it in 3 years, he can do it in 3 years. If a guy takes somebody 4 years, then it takes him 4 years. But that can be the variable component. And I think what we can do is, some of these kids can probably finish high school in 3.5 years. They can go out and they can pull in one of these community college certificate programs on how to program a CNC machine or something like that. And so these advanced manufacturing certificates, they walk out of high school and they can walk into some of these good paying jobs that we need trained workforce for in the state. And it really creates kind of like a highway system with on-ramps and off-ramps for them. Because let's say they finish high school, they pull in some of these community college classes, they take them in high school, they graduate their work, and you're saying like, I really love this stuff, I want to go be an engineer. Well, all of those college credits that they took are going to transfer forward to college. Plus, the company that they're working for, if they're doing a decent job, is probably going to help them pay for that college education, so they're not going to get buried in debt. And then they can go off. They can take a few of these engineering courses. Like, I don't like it. I like just working on my CNC machine or something like that. They come back, no loss. Everything's going fine. So there's a lot more flexibility in terms of how kids get there, and we're preparing them coming out of high school to do something. To be prepared not to go on to 4 years of college necessarily as the only track, but in order to engage into the workforce potentially. And I think that these are opportunities that we owe and we should present to our kids. One of the programs I'm doing right now I have this idea. Typical politicians, they come along and they go like, so if you elect me, then I will do something. And my attitude is just like, let's push that off. I'm just going to do stuff. And that way, if you like what I'm doing, you can just come along. You'll know what I'm going to do. And so I've got this program I've got going in the state, which is with high schools. And I'm working with the 10th and 11th graders. The 12th graders I've already bought into. I got to go do 4 years of college, right? And so the 10th and 11th graders, what I've done is I've arranged with companies in the state in order to be able to accommodate field trips. So you put these kids on a bus, you bring them there, it takes an hour, maybe 2 hours, and they get to go on a field trip at one of these advanced manufacturing companies. Many of these kids have in their minds that manufacturing, what's that?
It's not on the Common Core test.
Maybe not, because I don't know. Yeah, what are they going to do? How am I helping, right? But I mean, many of these kids, they have in their minds that manufacturing is like the workhouses of the early 19th century, and you go into one of these like clean room manufacturing places, and you're like, wait a minute, what are they doing? I don't understand, I mean, they don't realize the opportunities, and this is really what the 21st century is all about. These are the kinds of jobs that kids are going to be able to live here in the state, raise a family in the state, and we're all going to be beneficiaries of that, so. Yeah, so the high schools have, but who hasn't that's why I'm talking about the community college system. And the community college system is partnering with the businesses. So you can go into the community college systems now. They all have state-of-the-art CNC machines. Some, and they're training on the machines that the manufacturing companies are using because they're partnering with them and saying, okay, what are the machines you guys are using? Those are the ones we're going to have in our facilities. So that when these kids come out, they're already working on the machines that they know, they already have learned on the machines they're going to be using in the work environment. So a couple of ideas, and now you're beginning to work in my space, actually, right? My Shark Tank space. So in addition to some of my other things, I actually was also the executive in residence. I was an executive in residence down at Boston University, which was responsible for technology transfer. So essentially what was happening is we had a bunch of smart guys in the sciences and in the IT and everything else coming up with all these great ideas. And so my job was to help figure out if these things can be commercialized and sold. So I do know, what that looks like, and I think probably, there's a couple places where that needs to reside in the state. One place it needs to reside is in the university system because they generate a whole bunch of really good ideas if they're functioning well as a university system. The second place is really kind of the angel investor, the venture capital ecosystem in the state. And we don't have a very strong venture capital ecosystem in this state. Actually, I shouldn't say most. I don't have any investments in New Hampshire. My investments are mostly in the Boston or the California markets because that's where a lot of this stuff is originating from. I can tell you I was just recently working with the I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it's the Innovation Center. It's a early, it's an incubator for startups down in Portsmouth. And there's a guy, Mark Galvin, down there who's doing some great work trying to drive some of these things to market. But we're going to have to do some things and I think the governor has a role in that to try and bring in that investment community so these good ideas can get capitalized on. Because I can tell you, when you're saying if you have a good idea and you got a patent, you don't need a congressman, you don't need any of that stuff. What you need is somebody who knows how to sell the idea. And if you need funding to get it going, then you need guys who are in the angel investing venture capital space to get it up and running.
Right.
Exactly. Right. Well, I mean, if you have a good patent and then it shouldn't be able to be stolen. That's the whole point of a patent. Yeah.
$861 a month.
Yeah, but then you have to look. So what we need to amp up the investment, the ecosystem for the investment. So you have guys, like myself and like other colleagues of mine who are saying like, that's a good idea. I'm going to go in on that patent. I'll fund the patent, but I want a piece of the action if I think we can sell it at some point. So, right, but because it's true, if you're an inventor and you're looking, as an investor, I'm more than a patent. I do like IP because it does provide me some form of protection, but I also like prototypes and production, scaled items because then I can actually make some money off of it, right? Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me come tonight. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, and I'll hang around a little bit if anybody's got any questions. Thanks.